Gone Global. Leading Britain's conversation. The Nigel Farage Show.
Mr. Nigel Farage.
Thank you, Donald, and good evening, everybody. Well, it is quite remarkable that 2 weeks ago, the Brady Amendment, if you remember, which was backed by the government, passed, and for the first time it seemed properly, the Prime Minister had Parliament behind her, had a mandate to go to Brussels and to renegotiate the Irish backstop. Today, Valentine's Day was meant to be a huge showdown, but in fact we were told it didn't really matter because this had all been kicked into the long grass to the end of the month. But a government motion, which on the face of it was supposed to be a fairly neutral motion, but which took account of the Spellman Amendment a couple of weeks ago, which wanted to rule out Parliament ever going for a no deal. That was there, and the ERG came up and said they simply couldn't vote for it, and some on the other wing of the party too, and she's lost by 45 tonight. So for 2 weeks, she had the support of the House of Commons, and now she hasn't got the support of the House of Commons. So Brexit is in, well, a continuing mess with just 43 days to go until we're due to leave. Goodness knows what Brussels are making of all of this evening. But, you know, there's something else about this. To me, it isn't that she's lost control. There's something else that happened tonight, and Jeremy Corbyn really got this bit right.
She cannot keep on just running down the clock and hoping that something will turn up that will save her day and save her face. So it is surprising that the Prime Minister is not even here to hear the result of this vote. It's surprising, as I said, Mr. Speaker, the Prime Minister is not here. Is there some way by which you could encourage her to return to the dispatch box and tell us what her plan actually is?
Now, you know, regular listeners to this show will know I've not been a great fan of the Prime Minister, but I have actually praised her again and again and again for her stoic stickability. You know, amazing that day after day, despite the crisis, she's there, facing up to it all. And I think quite a lot of the public have a certain grudging respect for her because they know she's been going through a tough time. But not to even be there and to face this down makes me ask whether she's actually fit to lead the country through this crisis. Well, joining me is LBC's political editor, Theo Usherwood. Theo, this motion was supposed to be a neutral motion, but it's quite a big loss, isn't it?
It was supposed to be a neutral motion, Nigel, but here's the thing. It incorporated the Caroline Spellman Amendment from a couple of weeks ago, which took no deal off the table. And the reason it did that was Theresa May is thought to have done a deal with Remain Conservative MPs not to put forward an amendment, along with Yvette Cooper, which would in effect hand power to MPs to take control of the Brexit process and force an extension of Article 50. A couple of nights ago, the ERG got wind of this. They could see what was going to happen, and they thought that they would not support this. They even went and told the Chief Whip, Julian Smith, that they would not support it. But of course, because there'd been a done deal with the Remainers within the Conservative Party, the Chief Whip couldn't back down. Theresa May couldn't back down. Indeed, her spokesman at lunchtime said she wasn't going to back down. And so the motion stood. And then the ERG went and abstained, and they lost by 45. Even, we think, some Remain Conservative MPs abstained. Now, this is a symbolic vote as far as Parliament is concerned. It's non-legally binding motion. It all looks fairly anodyne. But back in Brussels...
What are they supposed to think in Brussels? I mean, is no deal still part of our negotiating position, or isn't it? I mean, I don't know.
But the point that what number 10 fear, what the government fears, is that in Brussels, the likes of Martin Selmayr, Michel Barnier, Jean-Claude Juncker, Donald Tusk, they're going to think, well, why should we offer the Prime Minister anything, any concessions on the backstop, even if she tells us that she can get it through Parliament, because she can't even pass a non-binding motion, neutral motion, on the floor of the House of Commons. Why should we offer anything? And what's very interesting is that when the Brexit Select Committee went over to meet Martin Selmayr, the new Secretary-General at the European Commission, he wanted to find out, particularly from Andrew Jenkin and John Whittingdale, leavers within that, Tory leavers within that committee, exactly what they would be prepared to accept. And he came away with the impression that they weren't going to accept anything less than revised changes, reopening the backstop and reopening the withdrawal agreement and taking out the backstop. So they are acutely aware in Brussels that Theresa May needs some significant changes which they've said they're not willing to give. But tonight, it will leave Theresa May, her negotiating strategy, floundering, because what can she say to the likes of Mr. Selmayr? What can she possibly say that can convince them to offer her anything and not just having another embarrassment? It's a big step forward for those who want a no-deal Brexit.
Yeah, if she as Prime Minister is prepared to countenance it, then it certainly is.
Absolutely, and that's why the comments from Ollie Robbins, the chief Brexit negotiator in a bar in Brussels, are very significant, because he's saying, well, actually the choice is between an extension of Article 50 and Mrs May's deal. Whereas actually people like Mark Francois and Jacob Rees-Mogg and yourself think the choice should be between her deal and no deal. Of course, the European Union have a significant part to play in this, Nigel, because they have to agree to an extension to Article 50. It's no good Yvette Cooper saying that she wants an extension to Article 50. The European Union have to agree to it, and it might be the case that a few of the 27 might turn around and say, we're done with this, you can move without a deal.
This is the possibility, isn't it? That
no deal happens by accident.
The last big European summit, it's worth bearing this in mind, folks, is 21st, 22nd of March, just a few days before March the 29th, and that's where any big decision of the leaders gets made, and there's no opportunity to change that. So we could leave on no deal, but it'll be, I think, more by accident than by design. Theo, thank you. Well, I just take the view that she, from the start, has given a whole series of contradictory messages on Brexit. What she said and what she's done have often been different things. And I really do think not only has she lost the confidence of the House, but she just, by not turning up, that looks very, very weak and very bad indeed. Political leaders have to enjoy the triumphs, but also they have to be there and face the failures as well. It is an extraordinary thing. Do you think she's fit to lead the country through this crisis? And if you think, yep, whatever's happened, she's the only option we've got, call 0345 6060 973. Maybe like me, you think, you know what, she's unfit to lead. This is headed for disaster. And Theo thinks no deal got a bit closer. Maybe it did, but I have to say I still think we're looking more like extension every day that goes by. Then please text to 84850 and tell me, do you actually feel sorry for her as leader through all of this, or is that not a quality we want to see in our leaders? Please tweet using the hashtag Farage and LBC at LBC, and of course Facebookers, you can comment too. Not a great evening for the Prime Minister. John is a new caller from Epsom. Yes. Welcome, John.
Good evening, Nigel.
Good
evening. To speak to you.
So,
Nigel, she's probably listening. Hopefully she is.
Right.
They say that if you sit on the fence, you get a very sore rectum. Theresa May must have the sorest rectum on this planet. She's tried to appease so many people. She's tried so hard. It's time for her to go. She's just failed. Let's get a Brexiteer in and take us forward to, a no deal. Probably no deal.
Is there time, John? Is there time to get a new leader, given there are 43 days to go until we're due to leave?
I don't know their, the way they do things, but she's got to go, mate. She's had an agenda, hasn't she, from day one to kind of do the softest Brexit. It's not going to work for her. So it's just time to go.
Time to go. John, thank you. Very, very clear. And I get on Twitter. As a Conservative Party member, I believe Theresa May should step down and allow members the opportunity to elect a leader who supports the UK leaving the EU. I get that. I understand that. There is just a slight problem here. It's called the ticking clock. Could you do that within the next 43 days? Could you do it before the summit on the 21st of March? I don't believe you could. Matthew is a regular caller from Heathrow. Hi, Matthew.
Hi, Nigel. I think we've got to be giving Theresa May more time. She needs time, and I think it's...
How many years, Matthew? How many years does she need, Matthew?
Well, we've only got until the 29th of March, and I'm sure you've got to accept now we're not going to leave without a deal, but basically it could go right up to the 29th of March, and then she'll announce that basically we are going to leave. They've done an agreement that nothing will change, and then we could get through to the trade talks, because we've got to make it to the trade talks.
Okay, Matthew, that's fine. That's fine.
We can do that is if we leave.
But even if she does a deal, Matthew, even if logic says, right, with all EU negotiations, it goes to the 11th hour and a deal gets done, right? History of the EU shows you that. However, the slight problem here is whatever deal she finally agrees, some sort of amendment to the withdrawal agreement with Barnier and the Brussels crew, she has to get it approved by Westminster, and she absolutely has to get it approved by the European Parliament. So whichever way you look at it, time is running out. But do you think, Matthew, she is the right person to lead us through this?
Well, yeah, I mean, I think basically, I mean, she's trying to keep both sides happy, and that's why she's having so much difficulties. So Remainers and Brexiteers all have to be supporting her. So we've got to be worked together to get the right deal.
Do you know what, Matthew?
One funny thing, I don't know if you realise, I mean, the first business day after the 29th of March is the 1st of April, and whether she's going to stand up and say, April Fools, it was all a joke.
Well, that's a thought. That's a thought. Matthew, thank you. I just, as Matthew says, trying to please both sides. There's a fork in the road. She hasn't decisively taken one or the other. Mike is a new caller from Connecticut in the USA. Welcome, Mike.
Good evening, Nigel. It's an honour to speak to you, sir.
Well, pleasure to have you on the show. So, looking at our leader from over there, does she appear to you to be a strong British leader?
No!
Right.
Very simply, she does not. I think that she's spineless. And I think that me being an American, she'll probably dismiss my criticism if she's listening to the show. But I see this in American politicians on a regular basis. Not from our president, but from so many people in Congress, in state governments, in local governments. When you don't even show up to a vote like this, which is absolutely monumental. I watched the vote on YouTube. I watched it on UK Parliament on YouTube.
Yep.
And the fact that Jeremy Corbyn called her up for not even showing up to the vote...
He was right, wasn't he?
He was absolutely right. I had to put my head down and say, yo, that is so embarrassing. I feel bad for you guys. I really do.
Well, Mike, I'm going to be on American television later on this evening on a couple of shows on Fox, and I have to say, it must be quite bewildering in one way for Americans to look at Brexit and how complex the process is. But on a basic act of leadership, her failure to show up and face the music today, Mike, was very weak. Indeed. Mike, I thank you for your long-distance call. You're listening to the Nigel Farage Show exclusively on LBC. It's now 6:15 and time for the news headlines with Lisa Aziz. For a brief period of 2 weeks, Mrs May had the confidence and support and majority in the House of Commons behind her negotiating strategy with Brussels. That, in the last hour, has completely disappeared. She's lost the government motion on her negotiating position by 45 votes. I have little sympathy for Monsieur Barnier and the others, but what on earth are they to think? And even if they did make some concessions to her, what confidence would they have that any of it would actually go through the House of Commons? Mrs May's deal looks even more remote as passing than it did before, meaning the other possibilities of a no-deal Brexit or an extension to Article 50 become even bigger, I would have thought. But is she actually given, not just that she's managed to make a mess of that brief period of having a majority, but she didn't even turn up to vote or face the results, and Jeremy Corbyn called her out on it. And I've said for months and months and months, the one thing I admire in the woman is she turns up. She's got stickability, certain stoic qualities, and they were absent today. I reckon that's really very, very bad news for her. Gary in Muswell Hill says, Nigel, not even you could lead the country to Brexit because Parliament has the final say and they don't want to leave. You would be as impotent as Mrs May is. Gary, Brexit was a fork in the road, a big decision to take. The Prime Minister, ever since that Florence speech, has tried to keep a foot on both sides of that divide. Tried, in a sense, to please both wings of her warring party. And you're right, Gary, the parliamentary numbers have always been a major problem. But had she taken a clear, decisive course and said, this is what we are going to do, and if Brussels want to play ball, that's fantastic. But if they don't, we will leave on WTO terms. We'll go for the Article 24 option that we've talked about on this show to give us 2 years of no tariffs and time to negotiate. What would have happened, Gary, is the country would have rallied round her to such an extent she'd have been miles ahead in the opinion polls. And it's a funny thing, Gary, when the country is with you, the parliamentary numbers get easier. This is a failure of leadership, in my opinion. Tell me I'm wrong. 0345 6060 973. Noel is a new caller from Malvern in Worcestershire. Good evening, Noel.
Good evening, Nigel. Good to speak to you.
Good to speak to you. So, has she failed as a leader, Noel?
I personally, I don't think, and please don't take offence at what I'm about to say, so I should just back this up by saying I was quite an avid Remain supporter. I was giving leaflets out, T-shirts, campaigning, all the rest of it. Mainly because I thought 2.5 years ago that this would be the outcome. I believe really strongly that I don't think anybody could do a better job than this. Not with respect, not you, not David Davis, any of the others. Definitely not Jeremy Corbyn. And I hand on heart, think that the problem here is that not only is the country split, but politics are split. And I think if Corbyn had got in, he'd be in the same position in that nobody can unite when you've got 52-48. If it was an 80-20 split, I'd say that it was possible. And I would like to add as well that I accept the referendum completely, and I think going for a second referendum would be treacherous and completely the wrong thing to do.
That's very interesting.
But I would like to know, the question I was hoping I could ask you actually is where is the compromise going to be, so that we don't end up... I think an extension is completely pointless, because all it's going to do is drag this national nightmare on for another 6, 12, 18 months, who knows, I don't know, genuinely. So personally, I would like someone to say, well, actually, this is the direction we're going in.
Well, no.
Stop faffing around and get on with it.
No,
basically.
I tell you what, however split Parliament is on this, actually, I'm going to put to you that in a sense the country's coming together, because you, as an avid Remainer, and me as an avid Brexiteer, both agree that the result of the referendum has to be respected because we're a democracy. Totally. And also, Noel, even more importantly, you and I both agree we need to simply get on with this, get it done, and get on with the rest of our lives. And I sense, Noel, there's quite a big majority in this country behind getting on with it. All right. Yeah. So I don't think we're as divided as we were on this. I think there is actually coming together out there in the country. Now, I gave a speech on this on the 30th of January in Strasbourg when I said that given the impasse, given the disaster that is the withdrawal agreement, a sort of Remainers Brexit, but doesn't please anybody, that the only way we can deliver this is to leave on a negotiated WTO terms. But if we go to the GATT treaty and ask the WTO to act as neutral brokers, which, by the way, they've said they will, we will buy ourselves at least 2 years of tariff-free and quota-free trading whilst we can sort out a free trade agreement. And I honestly believe that is the only way we can, A, deliver Brexit, and B, not have a short-term crisis, a really massive series of bumps in the road from March the 30th onwards. And that's not what I'm putting forward, and I do believe that's the answer.
Would you mind me asking if Boris Johnson or David Davis had somehow managed to become Prime Minister, so a staunch Brexiteer was in charge of the Conservative Party, would we still be in this position now?
I think had somebody who was decisive become the Prime Minister, I think we'd know where we are by now. I think we know with Brussels where we are. We would know whether a deal was possible, or we would have gone down the WTO route quite some time ago. And I think, I think sort of, Theresa the appeaser, trying to please everybody, has finished up pleasing nobody. No, great calls, some great quotes from there. Thank you. Johnny on Facebook says Mrs. May knew she would lose, so she wasn't there to be forced to respond to an attack from the opposition. Johnny, that's what Prime Ministers have to do. It's the job. You have to sit there and take real abuse and real stick from people in the House of Commons, from every satirist and cartoonist, and they will always kick you hardest when you're down. It is the job, and she had won some respect by through her sheer stickability. Tonight, it wasn't there, and with it, I think her leadership credentials. That is my view. Roy thinks that Mogg's been running the government for a while, so why doesn't he just simply take over? Beatrice says, even the EU must be tired of this confusion among British politicians. Beatrice, I don't often sympathise with the EU negotiators, but they must be tonight. I mean, Juncker must be, he's probably on the second bottle by now, must be really very confused. Do the British have, as part of their negotiating position, a no-deal option, or don't they? Because in a press conference this morning, the government was clear that a no-deal Brexit remains on the table, and yet the motion that's just been defeated by 45 votes incorporated the Spellman Amendment of 2 weeks ago that ruled out a no-deal Brexit. I mean, I don't know where they stand on it, and I'm sure Mr Juncker and Barnier don't either. Giovanni is a new caller from Wrexham. Good evening to you.
Hi, good evening, Nigel. How are you?
Welcome. I think I'm as frustrated as many millions of people are. We just want to get on with this. I think most people are tired of all these political shenanigans. Giovanni, what do you think?
Well, we certainly are, and really, what's happened is that the people may have made a vote and made a decision, but sadly, Parliament hasn't. And instead of Parliament getting behind whatever decision's been made, they've been split. And when the opposition, i.e. Europe, has seen a split parliament, they've seen a chink in the armour, and they've taken advantage of it.
Mm-hmm.
Have we seen a split Europe? No, we haven't. They've been fairly all the countries have stood behind Barnier, and Barnier has laughed all the way to wherever he's laughed all the way to.
Well, Giovanni, can I suggest the bank? Because we've offered them $39 billion.
Absolutely. And it's crazy as it sounds, we just put that on the table before absolutely everything else.
I know.
And we just let them, I'm an Italian, and I didn't even get a vote in the referendum.
Mm-hmm.
But they just let us, we let them walk all over us. And instead of having someone who could negotiate, someone as firm as Mogg or even as Johnson, who were Brexiteers and had something about them, who could negotiate and probably have negotiated all their lives. They've had, sadly, Mrs. May, who's a lovely woman, but she's a vicar's daughter. She's probably...
Well, that doesn't make her a bad person, does it? That doesn't make her a bad person. I mean, come on.
But it doesn't make her a good negotiator. I'm sorry, Nigel, it doesn't.
Well, I'm sure there are plenty of vicar's daughters that are good negotiators, but I agree with you. This vicar's daughter is not a good negotiator.
No, she isn't.
She's not fit to lead. She's not fit to lead. You and I agree on that. Can I just ask you before I let you go?
Yes.
As an Italian living in the UK, if you'd had a vote in the referendum, how would you have voted?
I'd have voted to remain.
Okay.
But now, what would I vote? I'd vote to leave because I don't like being bullied.
Absolutely.
And they
Absolutely. There's a special place in hell, Giovanni, for people like me, and maybe even you now that you've renounced your Remain status. You're listening to the Nigel Farage Show, exclusively on LBC. It's 6:30 and time for the news with Lisa Aziz. A defeat for the government, and Mrs May not even sitting on the front bench to stare that defeat in the eyes and to respond to it. And Jeremy Corbyn saying she's absent without leave, and I think in many ways he's right. Is she fit to go on as leader through this crisis? Before I get back to that, I must make this comment that hundreds of people left this country to go and fight for ISIS. Some of them got killed, but some of them crept back into Britain and appear to be living as free men in this country. Something that I've always thought was wrong. I've always felt their passport should have been taken away for doing what they did. Today we learn that Shamima Begum, who went across to be a jihadi bride at the age of 15, she's now 19, and she now wants to come back to this country. She wants to have her baby delivered and looked after in this country. And Ben Wallace, the security minister, when he's asked whether this should happen or not, he's all over the place. He says, we're not going to go into Syria to sort of rescue her and get her out, but kind of if she turns up at Dover, that'll be okay. She can come back. That seems to be the message that's coming out of the government. And I want to say this. You know, when you look at the things that she's actually said, she said, I don't regret coming here. I'm not the same silly little girl who ran away from Bethnal Green 4 years ago. No, that's absolutely right. She's not. She says, when I saw my first severed head in a bin, it didn't faze me at all. It was from a captured fighter seized on the battlefield, an enemy of Islam. I thought only of what he would have done to a Muslim woman if he'd had the chance. So she's 19 years old. She's a jihadi bride. She clearly, from these comments, is a convinced jihadist. Do we really want her back in this country? Now, there are some that will argue, I know Lord Carlisle, former independent reviewer of terrorism legislation, will argue that legally we have to let her back into the country. But frankly, I think we should take their passports away. I don't think we should let anyone back into this country who is an enemy of all the values that we stand for. And I know that that's something that you won't hear many media commentators saying, but it is actually rather interesting that the Sky Data poll, Snap poll done today on this, shows 76% of those that responded think she should not be allowed back, compared to 16% who think she should be. I've no doubt if she turns up back at Dover, she'll be welcomed in with open arms, because that is how our government deals with these things. Well, back to Theresa May. Not there tonight, not facing the music. Is she fit to lead? Alan from Devon says it'll all be water off a duck's back. Tomorrow, she'll be back with another Ollie Robbins master plan saying Brexit means Brexit. Alan, she might well be. She's actually quite good at doing that sort of thing. But she normally, Alan, faces the music. Today, for some reason, she couldn't bring herself to do so. Dorothy thinks it's time for Theresa May to visit the Queen and ask to dissolve Parliament. Well, Dorothy, this is a possible constitutional option, that she dissolves Parliament and the clock does run down to the 29th of March and we just leave. I can't see her doing it, though. She's not a leader, I get, but neither is Corbyn, says Mark on Twitter. Jerry is a new caller from Glasgow. Jerry, good evening. Is she, despite everything, doing a good job in your opinion?
Good evening, Nigel. Thanks for taking my call.
Not a bit.
Yes, she is a good leader. She's a woman of integrity, and I believe that she will keep her word. And her word to this nation was that she would get a deal, and if it was not a good deal, well, we would leave, and we would leave without a deal. And I believe she's a woman of her word. Who would want to be in her position? She's a politician. She was a Remainer who took the job as Prime Minister to take this country out of the EU, which has been controlling us for years. She knew she would be in a battle. She has been in a battle. The EU have tried to control her. They don't want a divorce. They have been nasty to her. The SNP and the Labour parties want to destroy her. They are just playing games of politics. And I would have to take my hat off to her for doing what she has done. She is up there with Donald Trump. She is making a difference. And I'm just enjoying the show and eating popcorn because they will leave in the 29th of March.
Well, Jerry, I hope you're right. I mean, look, I would say this to you. Jerry. Yes, they've been very nasty to her. But look,
yes,
she made a massive mistake. She made it on the 8th of December 2017 when she flew out early in the morning to Brussels to meet Monsieur Barnier's deadline, and she signed up to the Irish backstop. She signed up to something from which we cannot willingly leave. That was, Jerry, where the whole thing went horribly wrong. And as for her being a woman of her word, well, I mean, frankly, over the last 2 years, she says one thing and does another again and again. I just can't agree with you. But, Jerry, let's put it to you like this. If her withdrawal agreement can't go through, and if she realises the numbers aren't there, she then has a choice. She then either tries to take us out on a WTO deal and the best negotiated deal she can get, or she opts, as her chief negotiator, Ollie Robbins, was hinting at a Brussels bar 2 nights ago, or she opts for an extension to Article 50. You believe, do you, that she'd go for no deal ahead of an extension to Article 50?
Absolutely. We don't want an extension. This country is a democratic country, and if we don't leave with no deal, well, this country is no longer a democratic country, and there's going to be huge problems in this country. Because we voted, the people voted. There is a constitution, isn't there?
Very interesting. Jerry, your faith in the Prime Minister is fascinating, and your belief in our country is touching. Thank you. Well, Jerry thinks she'll do the right thing when it comes to it and not extend Article 50. But Ollie Robbins, he said something different in the bar, didn't he? He said either it's her deal or extension. Downing Street has just issued a statement saying Jeremy Corbyn yet again put partisan considerations ahead of the national interest, and yet again, by voting against the government's motion, he is in effect voting to make no deal more likely. The motion on the 29th of January remains the only one the House of Commons has passed expressing what it wants. Well, yes, they can go and try and get legally changes to the backstop. They'll probably get something called a codicil, and there'll be an argument about whether that's legally binding or not. It's all well and good, Downing Street, accusing Jeremy Corbyn of providing opposition, but where was the Prime Minister when that vote took place? It really is most irregular. Jimmy says Corbyn's bill failed, or amendment. The SNP amendment failed. The government failed. Everyone failed. Well, it does feel a bit like that tonight, Jimmy. I do agree with you. Josh is a new caller from Bournemouth. Good evening, Josh.
Good evening, Nigel. Hope you're well.
I am well. So, I mean, the last caller thought she was a wonderful leader. I know some people do, but Josh, I think she's dreadful as a leader.
That will probably be the one thing you and I might agree on, Nigel. I think she's been awful. I don't think it's completely intentional, but for me, she's misunderstood strategy for tactics and has constantly lived on a wind's change of tactics and no kind of future plan, and they seem to backfire every time. I think she's been very poor. I don't think her predecessor was a particularly good leader either. I think he mistook tactics for strategy, and I think one of his fundamental errors was outsourcing kind of immigration policy to the further right of his party and the fear of your party at the time, Nigel. And I think if there's some lack of leadership from him as well has got us in this mess.
Well, he did, of course, promise a referendum because he was facing an insurgency from myself and UKIP, and that was why he did it. But Josh, that was just a reflection of public opinion, wasn't it? I mean, isn't it right sometimes that leaders do reflect that public opinion in a country has changed?
Absolutely. I think leadership reflect when public opinion's changed. However, I think if we skip forward to the outcome of a referendum, which was only a marginal victory for Leave, and I understand that that referendum was delivered in that result, and best attempts and endeavours should be to try and deliver a result. But when a party runs for government, if they don't get a majority like we have at the moment, manifesto compromises have to be made, and kind of the more controversial options tend to be dropped, because we are in a democracy, but we don't just go with 52% voted for Leave, so we forget the 48%, or we don't take into account the varying options.
No, but Josh,
52% wanted.
But Josh, do you understand the growing frustration, even anger in parts of this country, that the political class many of them are trying to frustrate the referendum result? Do you understand the anger that's there in Bournemouth, in your very street?
Absolutely. I mean, I'm out on the streets speaking to people quite a lot when we're talking about people's vote or other kind of options. In fact, a lot of people this weekend were saying revoke Article 50 was a lot of the conversations we've been having on Bournemouth. I do understand, though,
sounds like a very undemocratic place, Josh. Revoke Article 50? Goodness gracious me. That's awful. That's awful.
Leadership and our Prime Minister has a duty to deliver the best thing for the country. Okay, so if that was the attempt to vote to get Leave, but we say, right, the House is split, the country was split on a 48, and we went for a customs union, single market. Fudge.
Josh. I tell you what, Josh, it wasn't a close result. It was an amazing result. The whole world, government, the apparatus of government on the side of Remain, and the little Davids against the big Goliaths got 52%. I think it was a big win. We're out of time, Josh. You're listening to the Nigel Farage Show. It's 6:46 and time for the news headlines with Lisa Rizzi. Is Mrs May really fit to lead the country? She wasn't even there in the House of Commons to face down the opposition after she lost by 45 votes. Brussels, what on earth do they think of it? Well, we've had a response because a senior source from the European Union has told Sky News there goes the strong mandate in response to the Prime Minister losing by 45 votes 2 weeks ago, having got the Brady Amendment behind her to go and try and change the backstop. Seems to me there are not going to be any concessions of any significance whatsoever coming out of Brussels. I feel pretty certain, actually, of that. And it'll be a case, will the ERG and some in the Labour Party too, will they back down and then in the end support a deal they hate, a deal that many of them think is the worst deal in history? Looks unlikely. I do think the one result of tonight is that her deal becomes even less likely to ever get passed, and therefore the other two options have gone up. One, of course, is the extension of Article 50. The other is we leave on no deal. But it's her leadership I'm keen to talk about. And talking of leadership, Winston Churchill, of course, one of our most famous leaders. Bizarre. John McDonnell, Shadow Chancellor, doing an interview with Politico. And, OK, it's a slightly trick question, but you get these rounds of questions looking for quick answers. And he was asked yesterday, Churchill, hero or villain? And he responded, Tona Pandy, villain. And he was talking about the time when Churchill was Home Secretary, when there was a big miners' strike breaking into a riot in Tonapandy in South Wales, and troops were sent in to help the police break it up. Pre-First World War Britain had, at times, very violent trade union relations. It was not a perfect country by any stretch of the imagination. But isn't it interesting that that was McDonnell's first response? And it's kind of a sort of hard left myth that Churchill somehow wanted to crush the poor. I would just say to John McDonnell, actually, just remember, it was Churchill with Lloyd George who actually helped build the early welfare state in this country with old age pensions and so on. And most people, Mr. McDonnell, would have said 1940 hero. It does show a slightly strange mindset in our Shadow Chancellor, I would suggest. Back to Mrs May's leadership. Is she fit for the job? I don't think she is at all. Jonathan is a new caller from Oxford. Good evening, Jonathan.
Good evening, Nigel. Thank you for taking my call. I think there is one thing that needs to be considered when we look at whether Theresa May is fit for purpose, in a sense, is that, yes, she might not have the very best start. I think based on the conditions that she was elected Prime Minister, I think she's done the best job that could be done. With regards to Brexit, I think that this country needs to have a hard look in the mirror, especially those on the Remain side, and ask themselves, do talking myself down when I'm about to face serious negotiations going to help me in these negotiations? Or is it not? Because I feel that since the referendum results were announced, a big percentage of people in this country have gone out of their way to talk this country down. And of course, the European Union sit back and watch and said, well, actually, we don't need to do anything. We should just let them do it, talk themselves down. And when they come here, we know that they infighting amongst them, then we don't really have to listen to.
I agree with that, Jonathan. I absolutely agree with that. There's been a never-ending stream of Remainers visiting Monsieur Barnier's office, working with Mr Barnier to try to overturn the referendum result in this country, even the general election result in this country. And I agree with you. They've been acting against our negotiating position, acting against our interests. They've made it much... Their failure, their refusal to accept the result has made it much tougher. It's a point you make extremely well, and I thank you for it. Christine rather agrees on Facebook. She says, look, the Remain cabinet, the Remain camp in Parliament, they're constantly moaning and not getting behind the decision to leave, and that's given the EU the advantage through the negotiation. Very similar point to the one that Jonathan just made. Now, Keith says to me, you put the UK in this position. I don't see why you should criticise. Keith, I wanted Brexit. What Mrs May has negotiated with her withdrawal agreement is a Remainers Brexit that doesn't get us free. That's why I am criticising. Barbara is calling from Bognor Regis. Good evening, Barbara.
Oh, good evening, Nigel. I'd just like to say that I think we've all been had at some point or other with this.
Right.
I don't think she's a strong leader at all, but I think she's trying to give the persona all the time that she is a strong leader, but she's being manipulated quite a bit by those boys in the background. I think there's a lot going on that we just don't know about, and that she's just like a sort of everything for appearances.
Well, she makes her own choices, Barbara. Come on. I mean, she chose Ollie Robbins to be the chief negotiator throughout this whole process, and she's watched a stream of serious heavyweight cabinet ministers resign because firstly of the Chequers agreement and then everything from there to the final withdrawal agreement. Barbara, she knows what she's doing. But
do you not think that there's possibly something, things we don't know about, that she does listen to certain people and that she puts on a kind of show?
Well, maybe she does, Barbara, but let me ask you very quickly, is she fit to lead?
No.
OK, thank you. Bill is a new caller from Leicester. I've briefly got time for you, Bill. Good evening.
Hi, Dave. Nigel, good to talk to you again. I've got 4 quick comments. One about Theresa May.
I tell you what, Bill, you've got a minute, so make 2 points and make them well.
OK, I don't have any sympathy for her. She knew what she was taking on when she took the job on. She knew it was a poisoned chalice. That's the first thing. The second thing is she was a Remainer, and she said Brexit means Brexit. Did she actually mean that Brexit that she was going to do was such a soft option Brexit? You mentioned Ollie Robbins a couple of times now.
I did.
And how many times has he gone in there and undermined what the Brexit ministers have been trying to do? And she's been trying to do a double dealing all the way through. I don't believe she's stupid, but I don't know what she's actually trying to achieve. They're the first two comments.
And do you think, Bill, it's time the Conservative Party replaced her, or have we simply run out of time? We're just 43 days to go. We've run out of time. So we're going to stick with her and see what happens. Bill, I thank you. I'm sorry, no time for any more points. Quite a lot of you out there do think she's done her best, but I think more of a majority think she's frankly not fit to lead us, and not turning up tonight for that vote. Corbyn called her out. Actually, he was right. That's my view. I will be back on Sunday morning at 10 a.m. At 10 tonight, it's Ian Payne. But up next, it's Ian Dale.
Well, Nigel, if we think we've heard the last of the Tory splits tonight, just wait until you read an interview